Greetings. This is Greg. Today's talk focuses on the fact that European delivery chaos, though profitable, creates major problems for Tesla. The second thing we'll be doing today is taking a look at something called Dreadnought Model 3 assembly. Elon Musk really is enamored with the fact that he can use robots to assemble vehicles faster and without all the costs associated with employees. And one illustration of that is the Model 3, and we'll go through that video. And then finally, we'll take a look at what's going on currently with Tesla's stock price ahead of the end of the quarter. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks once again for joining us. Wanted to welcome you all back. If you're new, I'd like to also welcome you aboard. Also wanted to thank the folks on Patreon that are supporting us, and by watching 10 seconds of our ads, it helped also to support the channel. Now, there's an interesting phenomenon happening right now, which is that Tesla is now taking orders in both Europe as well as in China for the Model 3. Now, it's unknown the number of weekly shipments that'll be made to China of the Model 3 from the Fremont factory, but it was recently announced that Tesla plans on delivering 3,000 Model 3s a week to their Amsterdam delivery facility. And those deliveries will start in it's a 3-week ride through the Panama Canal, but those are scheduled to start being sold in Europe in mid-February. So perhaps mid to late January is when the first batch of European vehicles will leave the Fremont factory. So what's interesting about this is there's an interesting problem / question mark. The early numbers suggest that there's about 100,000 people waiting for the Model 3 in the more expensive versions. So part of this theory is the fact that there are twice as many potential buyers in Europe as there are in the United States for the Model 3, and Tesla's not saying how many people have reserved and are now ready to purchase the car. But again, from the unofficial estimates, about 100,000 people are waiting. So if you divide, if you consider the fact that approximately 10,000 cars a month will be shipped to Europe, in theory, it'll take about 10 months to work through the back order of vehicles that were reserved by people with their $1,000 deposits. So it's our conclusion then that pretty much the first year of Model 3 production and therefore deliveries into Europe are sold out for 2019. And if you want a car in Europe, you're probably going to have to wait, and you weren't on the reservation list, you're going to have to wait into 2020 before you can get access to it. So what's interesting about this is that Tesla, as of December 21st, is averaging about 6,000 vehicles a week coming from there. So if 3,000 of them go to Europe, in theory, there's 3,000 more cars a week available. If we've begun Chinese deliveries as well, let's say for giggles, China is getting between 500 and 1,000 vehicles a week. So that only leaves about 2,000 vehicles a week in the United States for sale to those that are interested in Model 3s. And I think that this is way too low, relative to demand. I think demand is at least 3,000, if not 4,000 vehicles a week. I don't think there's the demand for the full 6,000 complement anymore, because there are so many people that were on the waiting list that got their vehicles. And sort of the next large groups of folks are the folks in the $35,000 vehicle wait for category. But I do think that there's ongoing demand at least at 2,000, if not 3,000 or 4,000 a week. So what this creates is a situation where Tesla's actually in a very profitable and great situation. If the demand is strong in the United States, they could slow down European deliveries or if demand is stronger in China or Europe, they simply increase deliveries to those places and decrease the number of vehicles being delivered to the United States. So the first part of this show is just to point out that Tesla has an embarrassment of riches. There are at least 100,000, if not 150,000 people between China and Europe that are on a waiting list waiting for their Model 3s have now started configuring. And the problem they have is they can only produce, at this point, let's call it 250,000 vehicles a year. And so, in theory, the Model 3 is sort of grossly undersupplied for at least the next year when it comes to everywhere else. Now, these numbers are the numbers we can sort of visually see because you can extrapolate the number of people. Let's say half the people are going for the higher line models and half are going for the lower line models. So in theory, half of the 350,000 people will be satiated over the next year in Europe and Asia by this production of Model 3. What's interesting about this is that if Europe is sold out for the year, in theory, there's kind of a shortage that's developing in the United States for sure, as well as in China, based on how many cars are being shipped to Europe. Now, what this doesn't cover is the fact that there's a large group of people. I actually have been asking the question for a long time why it is that Tesla hasn't focused exclusively on selling in Europe even before the United States. And the reason is because with taxes, the average price of fuel in Europe is $8 a gallon. In the United States, it's $2.25, $2.50 a gallon. So the number of core reasons why people would buy an electric vehicle in Europe, including cities that no longer allow diesel vehicles on certain or gasoline-powered vehicles in certain areas. There's just a long list of reasons why a vehicle of this type is more important to Europe. The Model 3 is also a better fit. The larger vehicle is harder to fit in small parking spaces in the major cities of Europe. The list is very long of why Europeans will, I think, go nuts when it comes to this vehicle. So what I foresee occurring here, or we see foreseeing here, is the fact that the car will be selling for 10 to 15% above its retail price from Tesla because of the fact that you have to be a Model S owner in order to be at the top of the list. And that means you have 20 or so thousand, maybe 30 or so thousand vehicles that are spoken for only among S or X owners. And so then you get into the general population from there. And I think this is an interesting situation because it's going to give those European owners an opportunity to make some money selling their vehicles if they choose not to keep them once purchased. So I also think that there's another problem that's lurking and why I call this kind of chaos, and that is what happens to the trucks. As you know, at this point, there are about 3,000 prepaid buyers for the Semi, and those folks have in advance paid for their vehicles and are waiting for their deliveries, and those deliveries aren't scheduled to start until after Model 3 production deliveries has stabilized. Now, in theory, this should be at about 100,000 vehicles into a place like Europe and Asia, but if the demand is stronger than expected, the Semi could get pushed back further based on this, with the one hope being that there are a couple of things happening. Number one is that the amount of battery and battery packs being produced should rise to about 10,000 by the April-March timeframe. Number two, the Gigafactory should be production-wise on batteries up another 20% by middle of the coming year. So in theory, if you can produce at 10,000 a week, and now you're sending 3,000 to Europe, keeping 3,000 in the United States, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 to China, you now have battery capacity to address the needs of things like the Roadster and the Semi. But the reason, again, I'm calling this chaos is that there's what's kind of expected to happen in Europe, and there's what will happen. It's our belief that what will happen in Europe is that basically people will go nuts and start paying above market to get the vehicle, and that it's going to do extremely well to the point where Tesla is forced to put the battery packs in more Model 3s going to Europe and to Asia, resulting in shortages of packs when it comes to addressing future vehicles that have not arrived yet. So this is where the chaos kind of comes up. Who gets an allocation of batteries and why? And to be honest with you, we're really surprised that the Semi isn't getting an allocation of batteries earlier than the plan that they're working on, because all those folks have already prepaid for it. Hence, in theory, if you've paid a year and a half, not only a deposit fee, but the complete acquisition fee for the vehicle ahead of time, why is it that you're not getting your car earlier than folks who only put down $1,000, or your vehicle, in this case, the truck, whereas other folks have only put down $1,000 in advance and perhaps $2,500 as the vehicles are about to be delivered? One of the answers to this is the fact that there's a declining cost per battery that's happening with Tesla. The target price for a battery pack is somewhere around $8,000 or $8,500. Supposedly, the current cost for that pack is about $14,000. So in theory, part of what's being waited for is declining battery costs to facilitate a better price or better costs as you go to deliver the trucks. So that's one of the variables that's playing in, which is also a variable in the delivery of the $35,000 vehicle, i.e. the $35,000 Model 3. So I want to kind of finish up this part of the discussion with the general idea that I actually believe European sort of demand is going to be double what most folks are expecting. And Tesla has an embarrassment of britches, which is multiple locations, China, Europe, and somewhat the United States, all competing for the limited supplies of Model 3 that are being produced. And therefore, we end up with a nice throughput from Tesla of the number of cars being put on the street. And then this throughput also facilitates other things like, it creates problems on one hand in that you don't have enough batteries for future products, but on the other hand, you're generating solid profits that help set the company up better. So I really think it's a great situation, but I really think there's also going to be frustrated buyers who are either paying more or going to other makes because of an inability to figure out how to get forward in the line that's required to get a Tesla. The second thing we wanted to cover today is what I call the Dreadnought Model 3. So for this portion of the show, what we're actually going to do is kind of a switch screen. I'm going to be the smaller entity, and we're going to be showing you repeated clips of the Model 3 being put together by robots. Why did we decide to do this? As press, we get access to certain video that's provided by Tesla, and after I saw this video, I kind of considered it kind of Tesla porn or robotic porn, because it's amazing to watch the robots work in putting this vehicle together. Some of the delays you see as it moves the seats around, etc., really illustrates some delicate programming necessary to get this thing working. As you all may have recalled, Tesla kind of got in trouble because part of the goal of Elon was to put conveyor belts next to these robots so they could pick parts up on an ongoing basis from that conveyor belt to put into the car, and that really didn't work out very well, so they had to pull the conveyor belts and replace them with people moving the parts around and setting them up for the vehicles to be put together. The other thing I wanted to note about this is that one of the executives of Tesla pointed out that when they got their robots from the manufacturer, the engineers at Tesla actually took the robots apart, reprogrammed them, and then shipped them back to the factory and indicated the changes they wanted made to sort of reach new levels of performance. So there's actually a debate going on at Toyota. They limit the amount of robots to max 25%. It's been the same for the last 15 years. And they have the best quality in the world and loyal customers as a result, etc. Tesla is trying to roll into the 70-80% robot situation. And thus far, it's been challenging in terms of getting it all to work, as well as the quality has been somewhat sketchy. So it'll be interesting to see how this all works, but it is fun to see sort of what Tesla's doing, why, and how it works. And I hope you enjoyed the video sort of portion here that we kind of ran. The next thing that I wanted to move into is the fact that Tesla stock price is down somewhat significantly from the 370s to about 315 right now. One of the issues with learning how to trade or invest in certain stocks is recognizing the fact that there's something called high PE ratio stocks. So if your company is growing very rapidly, your stock is going to be well above its value in terms of vehicles being produced, which is the case for Tesla. What happens when the market gets nervous or chaos or crazy things are happening like Fed increases or the government being shut down is that most people will do what's called a flight to quality. They will sell everything, go to cash if possible, or buy things that aren't affected by the chaos of the markets. And then once everything calms down, they'll go back to buying companies that are solidly growing, like Tesla. So the fact that the stock price is down is not thrilling for most who are owners, perhaps like you, but it's also consistent with the fact that we haven't had new earnings or new numbers of vehicles produced to, in essence, support the story of Tesla. And this is kind of the time frame when entities like Goldman and Morgan Stanley casting negative doubt about Tesla can actually be very powerful in moving the stock, because people tend to run for the hills first and hide, and then come back and find out if the coast is clear. So I believe that this is kind of what we're seeing in the case of Tesla's stock price, which is the market volatility is crazy, and it's resulting in people being very nervous about where the growth curve is, whether or not the economy is in deep trouble, etc. And until we start getting solid numbers to demonstrate where things are, that nervousness, I think, plays well through the stock of all companies, including Tesla, and we're seeing that in terms of what's going on right now. So I don't think it's that big a deal to worry about, and I reference you to, the sold-out situation with the Model 3 in Europe, and in my mind in China as well, and how well the company's doing, and therefore there's no need for panic. But one can see sort of the short-term folks really nervous or panicking in the situation, and therefore we kind of have the situation that we have going on right now. At any rate, just a reminder, I'm about to do my 20 leg lifts, go for the half-hour walk, as well as try to get some fruit into the diet today. Want to thank you for taking time to join us. A reminder, please like and subscribe. Any comments would be appreciated. And we look forward to jumping into our next show, which focuses on sort of some interesting aspects of what's going on with the trucks. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Tschüss, German au revoir, French lehitrot, Hebrew Choda Hafez, Farsi farvel, ni hao ma, Chinese adios, and in Jamaica we say enough respect, walk good, have a great day, and thanks for joining us.